Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. It's time for another episode of Down to the Frame, where you pull anime clips into the editor to look at more in depth for the sake of appreciation and criticism. Today we'll be looking at the intense and extremely awesome Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. I love this show. It's filled with crazy action sequences, as well as a hefty bunch of fan service. If you haven't seen Gurren Lagann, I insist you go do so before watching this video, as there are going to be spoilers. I won't be talking about the plot too much in specific, but the clips I show do span the entire series. With that said, let's dive in. Now I'm using the movies for this footage. And this original shot that starts off the first movie is just wild. Gives you a good sense of digging through the underground of sorts. The remnant technologies of mankind as you just gloss on through. There's so much texture in it. And obviously this one's CG generated. But then you blast out to the stars. This one shot pretty much encompasses the entire pacing and flow of the series all in one. Now, Gurren Lagann was one of Studio Gainax's last series before a lot of its staff moved on to form Studio Trigger and later make shows like Kill la Kill. And if I were to describe their animation, I would say it's very messy. It's messy yet sophisticated, and I think that works out well. In some ways, it almost feels like a Western cartoon, dare I say, but actually in a good way. Back when I first watched the series, there was DVD commentary that described how they wanted to preserve that sense of traditional animation, even though this is clearly a CG production. And one of the things they would do is avoid using CG effects whenever possible and rely instead on more hand-drawn effects, in this case, texture. So Gurren Lagann is extremely textured, and that's one of the things I love about it. And if you watch this guy's eyes, they're ridiculous. Such a simple shot, but then you realize that, they don't even animate him as he exits the frame. It's just up and down as a still image. And, again, it's part of that quirkiness that makes Gurren Lagann very special. This foreground layer with the rocks, we got him, and we got several different layers of busting rock behind them, as well as a lens flare, or the light shining through anyway, right above. So there's so many layers to this one shot that makes it very impressive. And yet they still do things like animate the sword swinging around him, but of course he's not moving at all. But it's still very cool. One of the qualities we're going to be talking about with Gurren Lagann is its voyeuristic qualities, its ability to exaggerate the frame, to show things as larger than life, to make pretty much everything in frame epic. So got the length of his sword, which is just really cool. Extra distorted, extra long. Obviously, no sword is going to be curved like that. In this case, his certainly isn't. But for the sake of this shot, we're almost looking at it through a fisheye lens, which creates that distortion. Introduction to Yoko, who will have a lot of interesting things to say about. She gets one hell of an intro, comes busting through the ceiling, shooting down. Gets this very gorgeous, very smooth rotation shot as she swings around the Beastman. This is really cool. And of course, I just now realized it, but we actually go through her bra. We go through her bra between her tits for this shot. I hadn't realized that before, but now I'm extra impressed. Now, to be fair, I really do enjoy fan service, and I think Gurren Lagann does it very well. One of the things that I hope to accomplish here is to illustrate, despite the voyeurism, despite the male gaze obviously placed upon Yoko as a character, it's done to make her a more endearing person. And that, like it or not, she's more than just a sex object, and even those elements of her that are sexy as hell, and shown to be that way, are part of her character. Shows this shot again because it's got the treadmill effect. It's very interesting how they're kind of getting away with it here by putting a foreground blurred out. But yes, the male gaze is present within this story, but it's actually used thematically, I would argue, especially with Simon and Kamina and their idea of, manlyhood and whatnot that they're always talking about. and one of that is their relationship to women. So you can see here, the way the camera pans and moves around, it has a bit of a delay, almost like it has motivation, intention. So clearly, this is someone's viewpoint as it goes up and down her body. And of course, this is when Kamina himself is scoping her out. Things get crazy. The amount of texture in this shot is just unbelievable. And they're not worried about making the characters look a little weird. Like right here, Yoko's eyes are literally just like a V-shape thing. It's very distorted, and Kamina has like no face for this shot. But the quality of the movement more than makes up for it. And I love how it just transitions straight into the next shot, which is more detailed. Anime is kind of infamous for these types of shots. This is a bit more traditional, and Gurren Lagann is doing more of an homage to it than anything, I would say. But these plain colored backgrounds where lines are just flying past the screen to show a sense of velocity and momentum, even though you're being taken out of the scenario. Obviously, you're not looking at the background anymore, but some sort of smeared representation of the background in distorted space. They're going so fast that everything's just blurred, and we're staring right at them instead. Now, again, anime is technically running at 12 frames per second. Each pose is lasting at least 2 frames on screen. Now, they're doing a lot of stuff to create extra motion despite that. For one, I already mentioned the camera shake, the images being panned about in a very reckless way. But then they also use these movement lines to suggest the direction. Because if you think of it, from this pose, which is a very nice pose, to this pose, it's quite an exaggerated change. It looks very choppy. And they use that to their effect to create some engaging movement. Now, I chose this shot because it's funny as they get encompassed into the machine. The head, the face. These bands come out and grab them. Ugh. And in this case, their goofy, silly expressions aren't a sign of, like, poor in-betweens, but more so this stuff is done very intentionally. They get yanked in a little bit more. And here, there's a bit of a resistance. This is resistance right here, this little shaking. It's like, oh god! Plunk! And all of a sudden it snaps. Thunk! They're in there, and then just get sucked up. Now this shot's dizzying, but I like their use of lighting here and their consideration for, where their light source is. Because we've got this lens flare that permeates when the sun goes behind the camera and we're staring at it. It becomes very difficult to see them, but as they go around, then all of a sudden the sun is behind us and we can see them in light. And it's just a very well done, very smart shot. Now, my defending of Yoko's character, again, Simone goes face planting into her boobs, and you would think like, oh god, swish swish, that's a, just nothing but a fan service-y moment. And even if that's all it were, it still says something about her as a character. In this case, she looks at him. She's not upset by this. She understands that these boobs can actually have a use. In this case, they kind of sheltered his fall. She's glad he's safe. This shows off a very maternal quality to Yoko that is one of the reasons I think she's such an awesome character. And then she notices something in the background. Simone doesn't get it, but she pulls him aside. She actually pulls him further into her boobs, her bosom, for his own protection. It's a natural instinct that she has, and she's not ashamed of it. That said, there's plenty of shiggle shots, and I'll be sure to show them off for y'all. Here's another one of those shots that do, in fact, address the male gaze of Simone. The reason Yoko is such a fascinating character within these earlier parts of the story is because of Simone's childlike perspective. She is so much a beautiful, sexy, mature woman to him, and it's almost more than he can handle. So it's just like, boom, this is a monumental person. He's overwhelmed by her femininity, her female presence. Now, that said, they still do this every now and then. I guess take it or leave it, whether you like it or not. But this, what I would term shot, reverse butt shot. Typically when characters are having a conversation or you're framing people within a shot, you would have someone's over-the-shoulder angle looking at the other person. So Yoko, if you were to, like, lower her, you would see her head staring at Kamina. It would be a more of a straight-on angle. This is a more, distorted one. And, of course, it's because they put Yoko's butt in the foreground. Like, clearly this is a shot to show off her butt. Although here is more like what the shot would look like. Of course, they're going to start it off here. This little animation's funny because Yoko's voice actress was in the special features of the DVD, and they had her come in and literally animate Yoko for this one section. All these little tiny animations add up to create the shows that we love. Again, lots of motion, lots of effects to create dynamic motion. All the lines are very impacting. This is a more traditional shot that anime uses, and here it's used stylistically, of course, but I've seen it in openings and other things to create the sense that somehow the camera is spinning around someone, but it doesn't make much sense because Kamina here isn't moving at all. So how is the camera creating this type of shot without rotating around him at all? It looks effective, and it's more of a stylistic thing than it is a realistic thing. Like how right as the bullet flies out, he takes his moment to jump in the back, and the shadows to attack. That's a pretty damn good swipe. But notice, he's from here, he's in his wind-up position, and in a single frame, goes to his follow-through already. If we didn't have this blade smear of sorts, we wouldn't have as much of a sense of just how much he had swiped. After all this intense movement, it finally settles down on a still. Gurren Lagann does that a lot. It'll settle down on a still to show you to give you a breather almost from the impact of what was just happening. Another sense of extreme exaggeration. The ridiculous curvature of Kamina's blade as well as how long it is. They make that seem an extremely long sword, like almost probably worse than Sephiroth's, jeez. Now this is a very weird shot because it's Yoko's boobs talking to Kamina, pretty much. Her boobs are having the conversation, not her face, as far as our perspective is concerned. And yet Yoko, right here's a normal shot of Yoko. Her boobs are always going to be in the frame, they're always going to be voluptuously gorgeous, but it's what she does, her actions as a character. In this case, she's trying to, get Simon back on his feet. She cares about him a lot. He's nervous, but she's trying to, give him the push he needs. She's a well-written character, and I really enjoy her. A bit of a Bowser throw. So long, dear Bowser! Whoosh. All that dirt just scraping up. And then there's this infamous episode, which is animated by the artist or director, I'm not really sure, behind Beck, Mongolian Chop Squad, which I think is a pretty damn ugly show. And a lot of people were really upset when an entire episode of Gurren Lagann was drawn with this style, handled by this director, which makes even the more beautiful members of the cast still look weird. Like, what the fuck is this? This isn't even good for an American cartoon, and I have very low standards for those. Okay, I chose this shot not only because it's a very glorious shot, clearly, but, it's showing Yoko doing studies. She actually hopes and aspires to be a teacher one day. She becomes a teacher, and here she is doing some form of, reading, studying. There's nothing that says she can't be gorgeous while doing something that is completely unrelated to her sex appeal. It's almost too jittery to me, but regardless, the build-up to this punch is still very cool, and then slam! Oh! This is actually a very well-drawn flag. They might have used, like, a reference or something. Another shot, reverse butt shot. Kamina likes to talk to Yoko's ass. Another one of those sort of male gaze shots. These happen a lot more early on, especially the build-up to Simone realizing that Kamina and Yoko are a thing, and kind of his little heartbreak, because he definitely likes her. There's something he absolutely appreciates and loves about Yoko, but he can't quite put a finger on it, in my opinion, this sort of relationship that he has with her, but he's nonetheless fascinated by her beauty. And this is a nice little animation. I like it because it seems very real and organic to me. When you've got a character who's only moving parts of their body, obviously it only starts off with just her arms moving, but it evolves so that the more of her body that starts to move as it goes changes from frame to frame. It's got a good sense of direction. This is arguably one of the more smooth shots, but also shows you how interesting the in-betweens can be, because that's a pretty butt-ugly face right there. But considering they've been fighting and what's about to happen to him, it seems relatively appropriate. Shut up and grit your teeth, and he just slams the shit out of his face, because he's been very lacking in self-confidence. I like how the effect lines are supposed to be there to show movement, and in here it almost looks like blood. How they're just spatting out, like the lines themselves are breaking apart because he punched them. It's a very meta way of showing it. These are just his lips. This is his eyeball. Oh gosh, it's so warped and distorted. Their ultimate special attack, the Giga Drill or whatnot. We're in one of those more abstract spaces again, where the background is just smears of light, just... this helps them reuse animations so that the characters can use these attacks in various situations and places without having to really draw where they are every single time. It's very much like a Sailor Moon transformation. This little drill just gets massively swollen all of a sudden. He just swings it around. The shadow, the overbearing. Of course, we're again looking at it from a slightly below angle, upwards at them, which makes them seem even more large and imposing. Comes around the drill itself. It looks like scribbles all throughout the drill. They go flying from one side of the frame into the other third. So he's traveling from essentially 1/3 of the screen here all the way up to the top with his rocket jets, with his target right in the frame, in the third that we want to, interact with. And it's to show, like, the fundamental form of something breaking down. This is one of the Beastmen, and he's just like, falling apart because of the sheer velocity of it as he just gets smeared out of existence. We got this spinning effect that leads us right back into, like we just got put through the washer and just came out alive somehow, but clearly the enemy didn't. Just shakes off his, drill like nothing happened. Now, pretty much the entirety of this episode up to this point has been very gray and dreary and, overcast with rain, and to have Simone open up this, this canister and discover Nia, who's just this beautiful, brilliant, innocent, colorful spectacle right there, is just a cool contrast. And to kind of show it off, the light beaming over her, she is bringing light into his life, quite literally, through the way that this shot is played out. As the clouds sort of part and bring sunshine down right where they stand. And it's because of her. And this is a rather brutal shot. Kitan goes sliding into, stabs straight through his mouth, this horse's mouth. He deep throats the mech, and then is stuck, flailing around help me, before Kitan just rips him apart. It's a very gruesome type of shot. I like it. It's kind of more of that moe bubbly style. Every time they make a quick movement, her hair has to fall again. There's lots of, dynamic movement within the hair and the rest of, her outfit. But Yoko's pissed off and gives us a good shiggle to show for it. They kind of went shiggle crazy for this particular section. And another. She's a bad guy, and they do a good job of showing it off by just making her very ugly. To have this mouth show up, to draw the teeth, like realistic teeth, this big old well-shaped tongue, you know, anime tends to generally try and hide the more unappealing parts of the human face in some ways. Because if you just draw them flat out with contours like this, like the nose drawn like that, it looks very gross. Even when people are trying to, you know, do photography on someone's faces, they want to kind of hide the shadows, you know, equalize them out so it's not so stark. And so by drawing her like this, definitely conveys this sense of, you know, ugliness, as well as her gesture, how she kind of twists her head and turns back like this. It's very like a hurrah, punk-like kind of thing, like Matoi to Yoko later, to a certain extent. But it's almost like she's turning to, you know, then spit right on you. More shiggles. I like how they do her hair in this case, because sometimes when you do hair, it just kind of waves about. In her case, it has to, like, roll, and they draw it almost like her hair is a flame. Which is probably the only fan service you get of Nia in the first arc. I like how there's definitely a sense of exaggeration to her eyes. They open super wide and then kind of have to retract a little bit. It's like a boing kind of thing, and it just makes the facial expression pop. It's like, whoa! As opposed to, you know, you can really tell that she's feeling emotion there. She jumps. This is adorable little Huggles that almost drags them to their death. Now, I like this shot. This is something they added for the movie. Your little fish man, he's like, no, don't hurt me! Ah! He just gets bashed in the face as Yoko goes into this cool action scene. Now, clearly, this is a more roughly animated shot. All the characters look derpy as hell, including Yoko. She doesn't have the most developed form here. Her body is very basically drawn. And yet, it still looks really cool. Obviously, it's meant to be played quickly for the sake of movement. And then it gets more detail as it kind of turns into this shot. Freaking creepy ass, you know, scorpion lady behind her. But Yoko ain't gonna take that. Got a sequence of her reloading her gun, switching out the barrel. And we get to some mixed fan service style fighting, because of course the camera starts right in the middle of her bra, her bikini top, as she matrix dodges the scorpion tail. It's like dodge shot, wide shot, close up of the hair, reaction to pressing the hair. He has this really good whiplash movement. And the foreshortened perspective really makes it interesting too. Because, you know, no human is really that elongated per se. Behold! Simon! I also like how there's kind of a build-up. He holds his mouth shut and then wham! It opens up real fast. There's that one frame recoil where it gets wider than it should be, but then has to back up. It's very much like a gesture drawing where you just kind of take lines and go and draw in that direction to create, you know, this is the direction of the movement. This is how everything's going to smear across the screen. And then we'll draw the characters with that exaggeration in mind. Damn, that almost got her. She dodges it again, right across the nose, but it takes her bikini top with her. Oh, fuck. Grabs her hair ties and stabs into her tail, unraveling from the hair. Is a spare gun. I also like how they do that all in one shot. Kind of pulls out and zooms in. Technically, it is a cut, but it's so fast that it just feels like one shot to the next. And her hair slowly falling. It's a very, very satisfying movement. And then they provide a lot more extra detail into this more close-up pan shot. And also show the passion in her eyes, that sort of teary-eyed quality or determination with the expanse and contraction of the eye shines. This is when they all team up to do like one final ultimate attack for this particular part of the film. All the mechs are like, here we go! And then he launches his crazy Giga Drill. I love how this animation evolves. So he gathers all of their light into his, makes one super drill that just comes charging toward the ship, goes into its own docks, blasts straight through the hangar door, comes charging through that ship, goes into the mouth of the other ship, tears it apart. All the guys in the bridge are like, what? She's fucked. Again, they start to, their existences are almost being just completely wiped away by the momentum. Such a very common theme for Gurren Lagann's movement. Tears out of that, hits Viral's ship, goes through, tears out of there, and everyone dies. Creates tension. Like there's a legitimate struggle between there. And then it rips it apart. It's almost like the tearing apart of Motoko Kusanagi in Ghost in the Shell, but not quite as detailed, obviously. The more intense things get, the more you get these very scribbly lines. Twists it. Oh, it's a very satisfying one because there's a zoom along with the twist. Creates this kind of like, lock that son of a bitch. It goes into a instant boom. And they do it 3 times to show just how big that impact was. Now, in addition to all the extreme, intense things that Gurren Lagann does, they're also very good at handling the subtle emotions. So right here, I just love the evolution of Nia's face. Well, she's basically accepting Simone's proposal. It's this warm smile. Goes in, closes her eyes while she's thinking, but then it's also this sort of bright and happy. It evolves back into, calm, back into warm, till she finally says yes. Hi. She kind of gives a nod as she goes, as the hair still has to react and flail about. She's still maintaining that sort of moe-esque quality, even as an adult. They go for the kiss, but I love how this shot then turns out to be a depth of field shot, because we're going to go look at the moon now with them in the foreground, which is crazy. Just in time for the real conflict of the series to pop its ugly head. She screams. And this is one of those that's just like a good work of editing here. She screams out towards the sky, and it cuts straight to a shot zooming toward the moon. So it creates this sort of up and away. Viral's trying to protect Simone, and he just gets bitch slapped. And again, twirls are one of the things that anime often does on ones instead of twos. So there's a nice pause, a delay, as he then flumps down to the ground. And we wouldn't be complete without reuniting with the Yoko Shiggle. Banzai! What an ambitious little creature right there. So we got Simone and Viral doing a crazy uppercut right here. Lots of intensity building up, like, here we go! Boom! And even though the follow-through is basically just a still shot, there's so much movement with lines going around. And that's how they create something that looks like it's twirling. It's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But when it goes so fast, it actually does look like it's twirling. And again, ends on a nice still, so you can breathe and calm down after the intensity you just saw. And then split into a whole bunch of different pieces, crumbling away to create a shape, which is really, really amazing, that transformation. Just now here's the penetration scene. There's a whole lot of those in this show. God, I feel like I'm talking about a hentai. Crunch straight through the center. blowing everything up in the path. Just tearing that thing to shreds. Now the interior. And I like this little part because the drill is now in here, but it has to kind of change direction. And then blast off again. Here we go with another light shot, kind of panning over Nia as the light transcends. And again, she's sort of like, in this case, it's Simone bringing light to her, which is really cool. It's a very good parallel to the shot we saw before. The light comes through. She's still in her, anti-spiral, brainwashed state, and then the light comes through, and she's herself again. Yoko Shiggle, oh god. I gotta say, those are not the same size we've been seeing this whole time. Incoming bitch slap. Dun 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 dun. Fuck you. Oh, suicide is bad. And he's learning that the hard way. Now for this sequence, I really like how they handle the color. You know, they're pretty much all about to die. It's red alert. You know, Yoko turns, and voila! Kitan does the smoochy smooch. And they give this very gentle, warm hug. And it's made all the better by her expression. This is like old 90s anime style, animation right here, with the eye just kind of fluctuating between two poses or so. But it just feels so beautiful when characters do that. I'm always going to be a fan of that style of animation. And Kitan goes out on a glorious blaze. He gets probably one of the better line wipe shots. It's like he's just slowly whisked out of existence. It's very sad in a sense. And Yoko's pissed because she just finally found another guy she can love. We get double shiggles, double action shiggles. And then unleashes a barrage of missiles that just gets crazier and crazier if you just... Alright, look at all those missiles. And we're going to follow them as they go through their movement, creating each one its own trail. That must have taken forever to create. And they come flying out. And these guys are fucked. Little tiny little blankets to show that explosions are incoming. Very satisfying. Then we have to zoom out again. And again to show the sheer scope of everything. The ending to Gurren Lagann is brilliant because of the sheer scope. I mean, look at this. Their enemy is throwing planets at them. Like, take this, eat this. Then we go back to some of that pencil-style sketching. Very beautiful, well-thought-out animation. Evolving lines that turn into other things and transform as we watch them. Obligatory Nia fan service. Drawn pretty amazingly. Now, one of the things that makes this scene with Kamina and Simone so endearing is just how chummy they seem in their animation, how smooth it is, how they probably used human references. It's very natural. The motions they're making aren't necessarily deliberate, they're just social poses. Now, I wish this scene almost had a little more explanation, but it's kind of like a what-if scenario. What if Viral were able to go and have a family of his own? You know, what's in store for him at the end of all this madness, and so he's able to find a wife and child in this fantasy of his. And I just love the way that he, picks up the child and swooshes around. It's just so beautiful. Nia's glad to know that they're still part of her. When they'd been swallowed up, she can actually bring them on back. Again, this sort of shaking. Her arm makes it a little ways, but then loses progress. Makes it some more, loses more progress. But overall makes her arm closely towards the front, where she can finally let them all out of the ring. Everyone gathers to create another crazy transformation because their robot is constantly evolving. We just go into some great motion right here. She's like channeling Cuchulainn right there. Of course, she's ready to fight. I love this. She comes in, she's gonna go pull off a gay bulg. It's also pretty damn funny that her machine has the same irises as she does. You're gonna die! That's a really cool run cycle right there. Well, bam! Oh, that is so cool. Stabs in, goes into a twirl. Opens up. Boom! Shoves it in. Oh, that is so cool. More Yoko jiggle. Okay, so the ropes latch around him. He's like, oh no! So they catch him. They start swinging a chain, swinging a chain. And we're at the point where now the bad guy is literally grabbing and chucking galaxies. Which is why they've got to step up and create something else. They're all combining into one giant super machine to take on this son of a bitch. Forming into this flame-like ethereal being that has his own giant-ass cloak. Don't ask where it came from. It's very smooth. Whoosh. Ha-ha-ha. Advancing scale each time. Another fan service shot, a rather intense one at that. Jesus, Dragon Ball Z's got nothing on this. And Yoko gets her moment to shine. Everyone's in like slow-mo getting to read out a speech while they're preparing this ultimate attack, but it just makes it so epic and really cool. You know, we gotta fight for humanity's future and all that jazz. And they prepare the biggest fucking Giga Drill ever up until this point. Bust through. She picks up Simone and chucks his ass like a rocket toward the enemy. He's like, I'm gonna get you. Lands with a crazy ass super punch. They go tumbling in this very smooth, gorgeous animation. And Simone gets into the fight, punches the shit out of him. Huh? It's like, fuck you. He steps down, he's like, no, fuck you. Oh, wait. Fuck you, bitch. That knee, it's like, bam. That is such a satisfying movement right there. Because the effect, when he finally hits him and makes a collision, the particles are blasting out further than his head to show that there's like momentum beyond just his head. So it's like, bam! It's the kind of thing they use in like Yang's shotgun fists in Ruby to show just like how awesome her punches are. And Simone gets his own drill because he's just that crazy. Spiral race and all that jazz. Oh, you don't want to fuck with him now. And he's like, die! And they just evolve into this beautiful cascade of lines and scribbles. Omae mo shindeiru. And then giant ass explosion! Got these lovely sakura blowing in the wind. Always have to love that. And Nia on her wedding day. It's so beautiful as we just pan across all the other cool characters in the story. And of course, that's where I'm going to pretend this show ends, because I don't like what happens right after that. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to support the channel on Patreon, and subscribe to OtakuDaiKun for more anime lists, reviews, discussions, lore videos, let's plays, and the Holy Waifu Wars. Be sure to let me know in the comments which anime you want me to cover on this show next. It can be movies, series, good animation, awful animation, whatever floats your boat. Just let me know specifically which scenes or moments impact you most that you want me to take a look at in depth. Until next time, celebrate your fandom.